Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence without parole for all nonviolent charges for creating a website. Please help free this peaceful man. Go to freeross.org and sign and share the petition.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Dissecting Liberty podcast. I gotta warn you, we've been talking for about an hour, spanning everything from, Western movies to washing your hands with gasoline to, there was one other thing other than religion, but
Boy Scouts. We talked about Boy Scouts. Yeah.
Right. To religion, and we've been talking for a little over an hour, and then we're like, hey, why weren't we recording? So just decided to press the record button. So anyway, I'm Cotton.
And I'm Liberty Zero.
So I'm just gonna, the religion conversation was probably the most intellectually entertaining convo, so I'll kind of catch everybody up. Like I was talking about growing up Catholic and my falling out with Catholicism. It largely began with catechism, and if you don't know what catechism is, it's basically a once a week meeting that Catholic children go to. Very similar to Sunday school, except in my experience, it was basically explaining the same concepts each week, but like with each year, it was tackled a little bit more intricately, given a little bit more detail, and described a little bit more abstractly that the older kids could understand the older you got. And like my problem was I got very bored because I was like, yeah, I get it. You know, we were explaining this last year. You know, what's your point? And eventually, at 13, you quote unquote graduate from catechism, and I'm fairly certain it's 13. But you graduate in something called your confirmation. And it's like a confirmation of the faith. And you go through this big ceremony, and I think you get a certificate. And I remember at 12, I told my mom, who I didn't tell you this, Zero, but she was she was my catechism teacher, which made it a little bit worse. But I told my mom I wasn't going to be going to catechism anymore. And I didn't believe in God, and I was going to stop going to church and all this. I started getting really into Christopher Hitchens and that lot of people. And it really upset her, as you can imagine. But since then, it's largely through my studying psychology that I have found a newfound respect for catechism. Because so much of psychology is either crappy research that can't be replicated, or very basic research that can be replicated. We think it's true, and it is supporting something that, you know, the ancient Jews and Christians wrote forever ago. Is that better?
Yeah.
But it's just confirming things that people in the Abrahamic religions already believed, and that's pretty incredible. But that's my And then the other thing is, I'm waiting on a good woman that'll get me to church. So the applicants are open.
Hey, bro, go to church and you'll find that woman.
I don't know. I have kind of a hang up on single women hanging around church.
Yeah, I feel
That
that.
does that kind of seem like a red flag? I don't know. No, I've had bad luck with Catholic girls in that situation.
Oh, okay.
But maybe that's the problem. Maybe the Catholicism is the problem. Maybe I need to go hang out around like Methodist churches.
Well, I mean, I met my fiance at like this kind of campus ministry deal that like I was running the soundboard for them. They're like meeting at this church, and like I'm not a student anymore, but they like I kept running it because I was the only one who knew how to run a soundboard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm still doing it actually, but anyway, yeah, I met her there, and that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, like I think religion has a lot of good stuff that gets lost very easily when like the biggest thing, and this if I had stuck with it, it might have informed my libertarian beliefs, but since I didn't, my libertarian beliefs have kind of informed this. The biggest thing is the belief that like nature is a static thing that cannot be changed or tampered with. And by nature, I don't mean like using nature. You're not necessarily, in my definition, you're not necessarily tampering with nature when you grow corn,
mhm.
but it's like trying to organize a society without hierarchies. That's tampering with nature.
Yeah.
And a lot of this, like what really clicked with me was, I think it was Thomas Aquinas, because he wrote about that a good bit, and I know um, Tom Woods is a big Aquinas guy, as are a lot of kind of small government property right minded people. Um, but it's like oh, and then the other guy is the philosopher Spinoza.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, nature isn't something that you can change, but it's something that you can better understand as to live your life better. Like his Spinoza's, or it wasn't his example, but it was somebody's example from his explanation. Um, was you're on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean, and if you don't understand nature or God, he used those fairly interchangeably. Um, then you are on the sailboat and you do not know how to sail. So you
Mm.
are just completely at the whim of the wind and the ocean. Uh, but understanding God and nature is God and nature, um, is understanding how to sail. So things aren't going to be perfect. They're going to be rogue waves and there might be a change in the wind, but you can better recalibrate your trajectory if you understand how to sail. And then the other thing is Jonathan Haidt, who's a kind of a pop psychologist. He has the first example I ever heard of anything like this. He had the example of the elephant and the rider, where if you don't understand, I don't think he connected this to God, but he said if you don't, your emotions are like an elephant, and your rational mind is like the rider. Um, and on any given day, you cannot control where the elephant goes, but through different uh, oh, strategies and, like he said, meditation and stuff like that, and understanding yourself, you can begin to better control the elephant. You can never have
Mm.
full control, but you can better steer the elephant. And I totally agree with that, and I like that example quite a lot.
Yeah, I guess. Would you mind expanding on that, but going into like how Stoicism, like how that, like if that's like an answer, or if that
Yeah.
like how do you think that works into that?
Okay. So here's the thing about Stoicism. Um, Now I can't. I don't remember the guy's name. He's like uh, part of the revival of Stoicism. Um, Holiday. I'm looking it up right now. I think his name is Holiday. Uh, oh man. Anyway, so the ancient Stoics believed um, that you can completely get rid of your emotions, um,
Hmm.
which is impossible. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, here's a little known. Yeah, the guy's name is Ryan Holiday. He wrote the book called The Daily Stoic, which is a great book. It's like daily
Oh,
affirmations to read.
yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
It's a really great book, and there's a lot of stuff that the Stoics wrote that are really good. I like the Stoics. But here's a little known competitor to the Stoics back in the day. The Epicureans.
Yeah, they're like, well, aren't they? They're actually thought to be like the polar opposite, but like in reality, they're not as different
They're,
as.
yeah, they're not as different, but the Epicureans, Epicurus basically invented time preference, which is
Okay,
great.
yeah.
Like he said that it's good to enjoy things. Every now I forget the exact example, but he had an example with cheese. Uh, it's good to enjoy cheese, but it may not be good to enjoy a whole round of cheese. Uh,
Right.
have a little bit, enjoy it, but think about how having too much may affect you in the future. And then he said the same thing with drink. It's fine to drink. It may be healthy from time to time when you're, enjoying company, and uh, it might be nice to share a drink, but don't have eight, you know.
Hmm.
And I like that a lot better. But it's basically very similar to the goal of Stoics, which was like living a better life, a more fulfilled life. But the thing with the Stoics is they believed that you can through, and they all had different ways of doing it, but you can through whichever, whether it was Zeno or Marcus Aurelius or whatever, through their ways, you can like achieve a totally rational state of being with no emotional input. But the Epicureans uh, didn't necessarily believe in getting rid of your emotions totally. And the other thing about the Stoics and the Epicureans, this isn't incredibly important, but I want to show off my knowledge a little bit. Uh, the Stoic physics were incredibly limiting. Like they believed that the world was a constant loop. So, you live, you die, you're reborn, and then you live your exact same life. So, in the Stoic physics, there's no room for free will, which doesn't really add up with through meditation, you can get rid of emotions.
Wait. So I have to understand this.
Yeah.
So you live your exact same life,
Yeah.
like down to every action.
Yeah. Like the universe is a constant loop um that is born, and everything that has ever happened happens, and then it dies, and then it is reborn in the exact same way, and then it is a constant chain that repeats itself infinitely.
But so now does that like obviously I don't think that they were denying the fact that like time goes on, right? But
No.
it's just that you relive it like like I guess I'm trying to
I,
wrap my
I,
head.
I guess they wouldn't say that time ends,
Hmm.
like there's no end to time, but that rather it just restarts or resets, but
Now,
it
do you
doesn't
have
end.
okay? So you're living your life along with everyone else throughout history.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And I don't remember. Uh, I might have it ready to look to cite, but I don't remember who that was exactly. Okay, here it is. Might be able to tell you which philosopher of the Stoic school. Um, I don't know if you can hear my page turning,
Oh, I
but
can definitely hear
all right,
it.
just imagine me with a pipe and like a monocle. Uh,
A roaring fire in the background.
that's right. I
A
guess it
cat.
was, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was Diogenes
Okay, yeah.
who was writing about Zeno. So Zeno or Diogenes, basically the same thing.
Now,
But
another question I have is in their quest to like rid themselves of all the like basically all the effects that their emotions have, did, did they have to did the Stoics have to like come to a better understanding of emotions, or were they focused on uh were they focused on habits that like basically minimized emotions?
it was the habits
Okay.
almost entirely, yeah. Like the Epicureans might say, um, that like it's okay to enjoy a cigarette from time to time. Uh,
Hmm.
like if I know there's I don't know if this is uh like a countrywide saying, but um there's a saying around here, or at least in my group, that's never refuse a cigarette from a girl. You know, so like you're somewhere and a cute girl offers you a cigarette, you take it.
Yeah.
But don't get addicted to cigarettes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very Epicurean mindset. But the Stoics would be, no, don't take the cigarette, don't talk to the girl, go read philosophy. The girls get it's like that meme where there's like some girl taking a bikini picture in her bathroom, and there's a head blocking her butt, and it's like, no, women are not the answer. Blah blah blah. In fact, one of those I think the first meme of that was Marcus Aurelius, his face over the girl's butt. It's like, no, go read philosophy, understand Aristotle.
Breasts are temporary.
Exactly. Breasts are temporary. Rationality is infinite. Yeah.
Okay, so um, here's another question that I've come up with.
Yeah.
So I know that the Stoics, like, they don't believe in a completely joyless life, right?
Yeah.
But they do think that through uh like good habits and uh and being more rational, that like you will live a more fulfilling life. Like how do they try to balance that with, so if you're trying to like rid yourself of emotions, right?
Yeah.
To me, like my first thought in trying to do that would be like, oh, just become dead inside, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I like, it doesn't seem like that's really like their track, right?
Yeah. Well,
So
um, the Stoics are like the okay, so this is like forgotten, but I have a decent understanding of the history of philosophy. So, like Epicureanism is largely forgotten, but in the context of that time and competing philosophies, it helps a lot to compare the two. So
yeah,
that's why I
yeah.
keep bringing up. And I just like Epicureanism better. So like the I mean, it's a lot more reasonable to me. Um,
Right.
but the Epicureans would say, live your life in like the best possible manner to produce a happy and productive life. So that would be um, work out often, but you go to dinner and maybe have a piece of cake every now and again. You know,
Hmm.
don't completely cut out vices. Because then enjoying like a glass of wine or something, that's a great thing. Um, but don't do it often. The Stoics would be change your definition of what it means to uh, be dead inside. Like switch it up. Like think think about it in the way, um, like the Stoics came from the Platonic position largely. So earlier when I said go read some Aristotle, I was really wrong. Um, but they thought that think of it like it is to be dead inside, to be uh, to engage in carnal hedonistic pleasures at all, and then think about it being a rewarding life to study philosophy and engage in politics and do that solely. Um, so it the Stoicism does not leave much room for how most of us would think of not being dead inside.
Hmm.
They're more of the position to change your definition of what being dead inside means.
Or don't look on it as a bad thing,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Like the Epicureans would be like, hey, you've been working really hard for the past couple of weeks. Uh, you know, you got a couple of days off. Uh, spend some time with your significant other and binge watch a show. You know,
Right.
it's good quality time. You're not really getting anything done. Nothing really productive is happening. But it's you've done good work and you got a lot of it done. Um, so have a good time, unwind a little bit. The Stoics would be like, no, get rid of your Netflix prescription or subscription and leave the girl and go read The Republic by Plato.
Yeah, it's like a doomer mentality, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah, but I mean it's cool stuff. Like and that's not to say that the Stoics don't have anything useful to say. Like
right.
people like Ryan Holiday, who I like a lot. I mean, he considers himself a Stoic. I wouldn't necessarily consider him a philosopher. Um, but he wrote a book called "Oh, The Obstacle Is the Way." I've never read it, but it looks really good. He wrote a book called Ego is the Enemy, which looks really good. The only I've only read two of his books, The Daily Stoic, and I think it was his first book. No, it was the second book called Perennial Seller, which if you're interested in business or trying to make a product for sale, definitely check out Perennial Seller. It's a really great book, and he talks about some Stoic things in there. Because like it's about making a product that is that won't go out of fashion. You know, find a product that is useful for people uh, along like a 30-year time span. Because he says like most products outlive their usefulness under 10 years. You know, and people like that don't make a ton of money. But you know,
Right.
if your product can be a solid seller for 30 years, then it is perennial. You know,
Yeah.
and I mean, there's a lot of diligence in that, and it's a great book. Uh, and you know, he wrote like the obstacle is the way and ego is the enemy. There's a lot of Stoic stuff in that, and it's very useful. And I know Marcus Aurelius's meditations um, are like are a constant seller. You know, it's a lot of useful stuff in there um, for living a better life and overcoming hardships. Uh, but you know, I think for like a literal uh, daily application of the philosophy, I think Epicureanism is a much better pick.
Hmm. Now, if if you're good with this, are you comfortable with expounding on uh, Immanuel Kant and his oh shoot,
Uh,
what was his main thing?
the
The
categorical imperative.
yes, the categorical
Yeah,
imperative.
yeah,
Because like, so I took a ethics class, and I like they were kind of we were arguing and talking about like the different like schools of thought or like ethical um philosophies,
yeah,
and like the main two philosophies that they're like, yeah, ethical philosophies that they were kind of pitting against each other was the categorical imperative in Immanuel Kant, right?
yeah.
uh and then uh Mill,
Utilitarianism.
yeah,
Yeah,
utilitarianism with Mill,
yeah,
John Stuart Mill, right?
yeah,
And I preferred Kant because whenever I was like reading about utilitarianism, like I got the impression that like, oh well, I mean it's just kind of up to you to decide, or like it leaves a lot of room for like subjectivity,
yeah,
whereas um Kant uh is far more objective, while not completely, you know, like
yeah,
you know, there's still room for human error, right? But
yeah. Um,
anyway, yeah, if you wanted to go into that.
yeah. I'll give like a brief definition of both of them.
Hmm.
uh, Utilitarianism is largely defined as like do an action that brings about the most happiness. The most famous. Okay, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll define the categorical imperative, and I'll just read it. Um, so there's three formulae in the categorical imperative. The first one is that of universality. It's act only according to that maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a personal or a universal law. Um, so that would be like Uh, you know, if you do something that nobody else can do, and have it be, and okay, if you do something and if anyone else were to do it, it would end poorly,
Hmm.
then you cannot do it morally. The second formulation, oh, come on, uh, act in such a way that you treat humanity never merely as a means to an end, but always at the same time as an end. That's I have a bit of a problem with that because most people use the example of slavery in that, using people as a means. Um, but a lot of people with like the socialist mindset also put that use that as an example for why like wage labor is wrong,
Yeah.
which I completely disagree with. Uh, and then the third is the idea of the will of every rational being as a universality. No, I'm sorry. The idea of the will of every rational being as a universally legislating will. So that is basically the example that I was given with that one is, um, we're on a planet and we're in a wide universe, and the universe does not care about us. And I don't think that's a really great example. The other example is that person A is not any more valuable than person B, so their moral worth is the same, basically. Which I don't necessarily agree with either. If somebody is a murderous, pedophilic uh, degenerate, I don't think they're necessarily worth the same morally as a an upstanding member of society. But I'll circle back to utilitarianism. The a big example against totalitarianism, or I'm sorry, utilitarianism. Uh, well, okay. There's not that much difference, but I can get into that too. Um, the one of the biggest examples against utilitarianism is, well, if there are two different populations in a state, it might be more beneficial to population A if you kill off population B. That may cause more happiness in population A because now there's more living room and there's more opportunity for business and this and that. But that's not okay. That is
Right.
definitely not morally justifiable. And then the other thing about utilitarianism is, uh, it basically acts in a way as if there were no nature, which is kind of circling back to what we were talking about earlier. Um, like oh man, I forget the guy's name. He was the mentor of John Stuart Mill. He was like the first uh, proponent of utilitarianism. But I was notified of some excerpts from one of his books recently, where he was talking about he visited Russia. It was Imperial Russia at the time, and he Jeremy Bentham, that's his name, and
Yeah.
he saw how they organized their schools, where they had like these big round rooms that could be observed from a second story, and the observer could call out students and chastise them and punish them from this elevated position. And Jeremy Bentham, the original proponent of utilitarianism, thought that was a great plan, and he wanted to organize all of society like that, from schools to workplaces to prisons. And of course, he would be the observer, handing out praise and punishment. But it's the utilitarianism thing is a kind of a it's also kind of wide reaching. Like Mises considered himself a utilitarianism, and so did Karl Marx. So like the basic thing is, like I said earlier, do something that creates the most happiness, but that is not so much that's more quantitative than it is qualitative. Like it's missing a piece, and that piece is how you create more happiness. Somebody in their demented mind can think that poisoning a water supply would make people more happy because they'd be dead, and they wouldn't have any sadness. Um,
Right.
but with the categorical imperative and the categorical imperative leaves a lot more room for religion in your uh, like he tried to kind of um, universalize and objectify religious morality. Like he said that, um, oh, what did he say? He said that, he said, murder isn't wrong because God said so. God said murder is wrong because it is wrong inherently,
Yeah, yeah.
and the categorical imperative is a lot more confusing and there's a lot more moving pieces, but it definitely is a much more convincing case.
Right. Um, I wanted to kind of go back to the you had the 3 points of the categorical imperative, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then the second one was that you shouldn't use a person as a means to an end.
Yeah.
And that one was kind of interesting because I don't know how you get through life without doing that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like
It's like if you were to go to like a store, right?
yeah.
And like you have the cashier, right? And your only reason for interacting with them is so that you can like exchange, like, to like where you can go through with this transaction, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and like you don't have to treat them like crap, but
Yeah.
uh, it's like that whole exchange right there is you're using them as a means to an end, and I
Yeah.
don't know how you avoid that.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't leave much room for progress, because society is like mutually agreed upon uses of each other as a means. Like if you're trading somebody uh, corn for wheat, each person is using each other as a means to obtain either corn or wheat,
Hmm.
but everybody benefits at the end. I don't think um, Immanuel Kant. Uh, I am not sure that Immanuel Kant wrote before Karl Menger, who's like, do you know about Menger?
Yeah, isn't he the father of Austrian
Yeah,
economics?
uh, yeah. Uh, he's the guy that really it didn't really work out for him, but
Right.
he's like one of the first people that really argued for uh, uh, like the theory of subjective value. Because
Mm.
before then everybody thought value came from the work that was put into something. Yeah. Um, but yeah, Immanuel Kant definitely wrote before him. So they were in the kind of the dark ages of economics, I guess. Um, so I I can kind of understand it. I'm torn between things like that. Like, if Immanuel Kant was such a great mind, he should have been able to recognize that it is conducive to a successful society to at different points use people as a means.
Hmm.
Um, but that's not to say. Well, what he mostly was attacking with that second point was slavery. Uh,
Oh, okay.
but that's not the only way it can be interpreted, and that's the problem. And
Right.
that's the other problem with philosophers. They sometimes they don't to try to save like the lyrical value of their writing. They may not say things bluntly. So in uh, grounding for the metaphysics of morals, he didn't write, hey bro, I'm talking about slavery, you know. Uh, but I mean, it's largely a good thing to do. Don't use people like we say that, just kind of colloquially.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's basically what he meant. Don't take advantage of people. Don't trick them. You know,
Right.
for your own benefit. And I mean that's how I interpret it, but the socialists interpret it differently.
Okay, so kind of switching gears here, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Um, if you like read any into objectivism, right?
yeah,
Uh, Ayn Rand sees like selfishness as like a moral virtue, right?
yeah,
And while I don't necessarily like, I definitely see your point on that. I don't necessarily agree, and
yeah,
that's not really like what I want to get into so much, but that it kind of set me off like on a different um pattern, or like it set me off on another rabbit trail, I guess. And like that is like, do people like, is it possible for like people to make like truly like selfless decisions, right? We use this term, right?
yeah,
And we say, oh wow, that's really generous of you, or you're so selfless. But to me, I don't really see that, because yeah, okay, if we're rational beings, right? Um, like we see that being generous or being quote unquote selfless, like it has its uh like its perks, right?
yeah,
And it's not like even if it's unconsciously, right? Like there are benefits to being selfless, or being like even like a good person or whatever, right? So I don't know if there's actually any such thing as a truly selfless,
yeah.
act.
Whether or not altruism exists.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I took my an ethics course, and when we were talking about utilitarianism, we wrote a book um, by this guy named Peter Singer, who's a philosopher. He's a really crappy one. Uh, I mean, he's the worst. He's a horrible guy. And he wrote this book called The Most Good You Can Do: How Effective Altruism is Changing Ideas About Living Ethically. And
Oh, great.
basically, yeah. And the thesis of the book was live as though you don't die, but give every little bit of excess away.
Oh,
Right. Uh, which the biggest problem, and he covered it a little bit, and he left room for this, but the biggest problem is uh, if you don't keep excess that you can later invest, when you do that, you create more wealth, which helps everybody. But
Right.
no, he was completely backing things where you just give people stuff, just give somebody money, and that's better. Don't give them an opportunity to work, God forbid. Um, but and then that's the other thing is like these people are living this way, um, and somebody will start a program. I forget some of the big ones that were in the book, but they'll start a program that donates like mosquito nets to people in Africa, which is a great thing.
Right.
Um, and they also live very meagerly and donate everything they make. So, according to them and Peter Singer, they are living completely altruistically.
Hmm.
But they're getting all this attention. They're speaking at places, they're getting written about in this book, they have their name plastered all over the website. So you can't say they're not necessarily getting anything out of it. And they don't expressly say that they aren't enjoying it. Uh,
Right.
so I mean, I don't think that altruism really exists outside of like children. Like you're if you're a good parent, typically you're going to be altruist in a understandable manner towards your children. They're gonna have like your children are gonna have to learn tough life lessons, and there's sometimes that you can't and you shouldn't help them. If they made their bed and it's not gonna kill them, let them lie in it. But you're gonna love them unconditionally. Uh, but I mean, like would you love somebody in a random person in Spain the same as you would love your daughter? I don't think so. And I think it's unreasonable to assume that people can possibly do that. And that's my biggest problem with altruism.
So, all right, but you kind of made an exception there with possibly your children, right? Uh,
Yeah.
do you have an example? Because, like, to me, I don't see that. So if you
Okay.
want to go ahead and go into that.
Yeah. Like a big example is, say somebody has a son, and when the son is 17, they get addicted to pain pills.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a good movie to watch called Beautiful Boy.
Dude,
Um,
I watched that like a few weeks ago
it's
with
a
my fiance.
it's a good movie. It's sad, but it's a good movie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, like, think about that. So your child gets addicted to a drug, and they are hell to live with, and they're hell to be around, and it's horrible to be engaged with them in any way. But you are gonna try and help them any way you can
Mm,
within within your possibility. If you pay for rehab 8 times, then you might as well not pay for the ninth time. you
hmm.
know but you're sure as hell gonna pay for the first. You know what I mean? If you
Right.
can. But like every parent should want to. you know
Right.
um but okay, so uh think about that. Your son's addicted to heroin, and you have the option of sending him to rehab or sending someone else's child to rehab that's in another country that you've never met. You're gonna definitely send your son to rehab,
Hmm.
as you should. Um, but you shouldn't expect to have that same uh, compassion and forgiveness for a random person anywhere else on the planet. So that's my belief. Did I explain that well?
Well, okay, so I guess I'll go into to me that if I'm wrong anywhere here, like stop me, correct me,
Okay.
right? Uh, but like to me, altruism is like giving to someone else or to others, and like with no like expectation, with no expectation of like getting anything out of it. And that's part of why I don't think like that it could exist, right? Because to me, you're always getting something out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like even if it's just like a good feeling, right? Like you feel good about yourself. Like to me, that completely, like, I mean, to me that basically discounts the idea, right?
Yeah.
It discredits it. Like the idea, it's yeah. So you were saying that like it's possible maybe with a child, but like to me it's always, or to me even like let's say you're always gonna like, okay, you have a drug addict child, right?
Yeah.
To me, even sending them to rehab for the 8th time, like I guess like you still have like a hope or a like you're hoping to get something out of it still.
Yeah.
And that's why you do it.
Okay. Well, I think we have different definitions of altruism then.
Okay, go ahead. What's yours?
I would define altruism as having no more love for one person than another.
Mm.
Like loving the human race as a whole, instead of having like a hierarchy of love.
Okay.
But I understand yours, like, getting nothing from uh, uh, doing an action. And I completely agree that there's, like when you send your son to the rehab, you hope that it works,
Right.
And then if it does, you're going to feel good, and you're happy that you feel good, and you're happy you did it and you got something positive out of it. But yeah, I don't, with your definition of it, I don't disagree at all. And that's a perfectly acceptable definition too.
Okay. All right. Uh, that what you were saying just now is like when you're talking about having perfect love for everyone equally, right? It did remind me, there was something I heard about John Stuart Mill, right? And so he's the main guy behind utilitarianism.
Yeah.
And of course we're talking about your actions should be the most happiness for the greatest number of people, right? And apparently like his mother, maybe it was like he was paying for her, like at the end of her life, right? He was paying her medical bills or having her in a nursing home, right? And he was confronted about this, like and I can't remember like what his response was, but I think he was just kind of he was basically admitting that like he wasn't like staying true to like his own philosophy. But basically, yeah, he was confronted, like, hey, obviously paying all this money to make sure that your mother has like a good quality of life at the end of her days, like you could be doing more with this money.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of interesting that like even he, like the guy who should have been bought in the most, couldn't actually like follow through with like his own philosophy, like when it came down to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, none of these guys are perfect. Like, Immanuel Kant was a horrible racist. Uh, but I mean, that when you were saying that, that made me think of, like every now and again I'll see a USSR logo on the back of an iPhone, like a sticker, and that's the problem. with these. Oh, that's like not being able to circumvent nature in action. It's like your philosophy's garbage, and it doesn't make room for these patterns in nature that cannot be changed. Uh, and you're living that out when you create this big philosophy and you're a big proponent of it, and then you don't engage in it in your daily life.
Hmm.
Uh, and then if you do engage in it in your daily life, and you're becoming incredibly fat or emaciated, or you're making everyone around you hate you, and uh, you're not doing any lasting change, then that's a very similar demonstration of it not working. Uh, like Peter Singer is an incredibly contentious figure, um, partly because he's like a animal rights guy and he thinks like animals should have legal representation in court and all that stuff.
Oh wow.
Uh, yeah, but I mean, John Stuart Mill was a very smart guy and he wrote good stuff. Um, he's like the guy that maybe not the first, but he's the guy that really cemented the idea of separation of powers. Uh, like when the founding fathers were saying that we should have executive, legislative, judicial branches, that was largely almost exclusively from John Stuart Mill's influence, um, which is a very nice idea. It doesn't work, but it's a very nice idea. And I mean, he with that at least he had the intentions of like maximum freedom in mind. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't think intentions matter nearly as much as action does.
Right.
I think we are what we do, no matter if we say we're something else. Um, but yeah, these people were very a lot of these people, vast majority of uh, like these proponents of different philosophies were incredibly hypocritical.
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, like I brought that up not to like really dig at like him personally, because
Yeah,
I don't particularly care to degrade his name all that much, but
he's gonna tweet at you, bro.
he probably will. But no, like I guess what I really wanted to like go with, or like I wanted to go, or kind of illustrate that his philosophy was contrary to nature,
Yeah,
in that at the end of the day, like he couldn't escape like what was actually important to him.
yeah,
You know, it's kind of like there are no atheists in a foxhole, right?
yeah,
It's like y you can have this belief, right? And it doesn't mean that it's all bad, but like at the end of the day, like you're going to revert back to nature, right?
yeah,
And yeah, so that's basically where I was trying to go with that.
yeah. In our second episode, I'm pretty sure it was our property episode. Um,
Mm, yeah.
I think I think I mentioned Friedrich Hayek's book, The Fatal Conceit, and I
Hmm.
don't think I explained it very well. And I'm not going to explain it here, but I'm not going to explain it any better. But I think everybody should check that book out because like Hayek was a liberal atheist, and in that book's just like a testament to it's like his love letter to what religion and family and like private organizations like service clubs, Rotary or Kiwanis and stuff like that, do to society, like what positive benefits they have. and how we're playing with fire, and how they're natural, like they're haphazardly forming organizations.
Mm,
Like the family wasn't, written, on a piece of paper and mandated, from somebody at the top of the social hierarchy. That's
right.
just something that works. That's evolved to help us be successful. Um, and that's like every time we talked about nature in this recording, my mind goes back to that book, and it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's a good stopping point.
Yeah. No, we covered a lot.
Yeah, not
I
not
didn't.
anything we expected to talk about.
No, I had no idea that we were going to talk about philosophy. Like, but it was good
That's my
stuff.
stuff, though, man. I'll talk about that anytime.
Oh yeah. No, that was excellent.
Well, we ought to mention to everybody that we have a Discord now, uh, and it's full of depraved, degenerate idiots. Uh, I have a couple in mind, but I'm not gonna give them the satisfaction of calling them out. Uh, but hey, if you're a depraved, degenerate idiot, why don't you come and join us?
Yeah.
It's a great time.
No, for real. Yeah, it's fun. We have some good conversations in there.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I'm glad we made it. Uh, and let's see, we switched our I guess you call it just our RSS feed. We switched from Podbean to Anchor, and Anchor's working out really well. Um, and there isn't we're in fact now we're on more platforms than we were before because Anchor just kind of it automatically distributes your profile to different things. Where on Podbean you had to do that manually. Um,
Hmm.
so if you're listening to us on, what's a weird one I've never heard of, Radio Public, uh, thank you for listening to us, and keep up, sticking with like the little platforms I've never heard of. I like that. That's very decentralized of you. Very, very uh, uh, that's a rebel move.
Yeah, very libertarian.
Very libertarian. Uh, well, you can find me on Twitter at Cotton Archist,
And then I'm on Twitter as well at Liberty Zero with a zero at the end.
and all the links to this stuff will be in the show notes at dissectingliberty.com/10. This is our 10th episode.
Nice.
All right, thank y'all for listening.